عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. First, to go through the ibadah, Ibn Hajar rahimahullah says, وَكَذَا الْمُرْسَلُ الْخَفِي إِذَا صَدَرَ مِنْ مُعَاصِرٍ لَمْ يَلْقَ مَنْ حَدَّثَ عَنْهُ بَلْ بَيْنَهُ وَبَيْنَهُ وَاسِطَةٌ. والفرق بين المدلس والمرسل الخفي دقيق حصل تحريره بما ذكر هنا، وهو أن التدليس يختص بمن روى عمن عرف لقاؤه إياه، فأما إن عاصره ولم يعرف أنه لقيه فهو المرسل الخفي. ومن أدخل في تعريف التدليس المعاصرة ولو بغير لقي لزم دخول المرسل الخفي في تعريفه، والصواب التفرق بينهما. ويدل على أن اعتبار اللقي في التدليس دون المعاصرة وحدها لا بد منه اتفاق أهل العلم بالحديث على أن رواية المخضرمين كأبي عثمان النهدي وقيس بن أبي حازم عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم من قبيل الإرسال لا من قبيل التدليس. ولو كان مجرد المعاصرة يكتفى به في التدليس لكان هؤلاء مدلسين، لأنهم عاصروا النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قطعا، ولكن لم يعرف هل لقوه أم لا. وممن قال باشتراط اللقاء في التدليس الإمام الشافعي وأبو بكر البزار، وكلام الخطيب في الكفاية يقتضيه وهو المعتمد. So continuing with the discussion on a missing link, we mentioned that Ibn Hajar rahimahullah divided those missing links where it is hidden into two types. So the first is tadlis and the second is mursal al-Khafī. Tadlis, this is where someone quotes narrations from a scholar who he heard, but he quotes from him narrations which he did not hear directly. That is tadlis. Now, mursal al-Khafī, Ibn Hajar rahimahullah here mentions it and says, وَكَذَا الْمُرْسَلُ الْخَفِي إِذَا صَدَرَ مِنْ مُعَاصِرٍ. So it is a contemporary, you're living in the same time, لَمْ يَلْقَهُ, but you didn't meet that person. مَنْ حَدَّثَ عَنْهُ, you didn't meet the person who you are quoting from. بَلْ بَيْنَهُ وَبَيْنَهُ وَاسِطَةٌ. But between you and him, there is a link. That means you heard it from someone else who told it to you. For example, if any of you, maybe say, for example, you didn't meet Sheikh Nuruddin Itr, but if someone tells you something of him, so you lived in the same time, but he was living in a different part of the world, you are living in a different part of the world, you didn't meet him, but someone tells you something, so now you just say that Sheikh Nuruddin Itr said. So this here is the definition you can see in the Ta'liq. Sheikh Nuruddin Itr gives the definition, هو ما رواه الراوي عمن عاصره. You are quoting someone who lives in the same time as you, وَلَمْ يَسْمَعْ مِنْهُ وَلَمْ يَلْقَهُ. But it's not proven that he ever met him, leave alone hearing from him. This here is according to Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah. So previously we discussed the Mursal, and now Ibn Hajar is discussing al-Mursal al-Khafī. So this means now that there is going to be two types of Mursal. You're going to have that which is known as Mursal al-Jadi, or Mursal al-Wadih, or Mursal al-Zahir, that which is apparent. So Mullah al-Qari rahimahullah, he says, ثم الإرسال بهذا المعنى على نوعين ظاهر وخفي. That there are two types of irsal. The one is zahir and the other is khafi. And zahir is what we it's huwa yarwi ar-rajul amman lam yu'asirhu, that you weren't in the same era as that person. So it's the same example which we have given. أي لم يثبت معاصرته أصلا بحيث لا يشتبه إرساله باتصاله على أهل الحديث. So that is the example of zahir. It's apparent that you are quoting from someone who passed away before you were even born. So the narrator is quoting, he gives the example here of Imam Malik narrating from Sa'id ibn al-Musayyib. So that is the when the irsal is apparent. But then there's irsal which is khafi, which is hidden, and this is what Ibn Hajar rahmallah mentioned here. Mullah al-Qari says, هو أن يروي عمن سمع منه ما لم يسمع منه أو عمن لقيه ولم يسمع منه أو عمن عاصره ولم يلقه. So now you can see the difference between what Ibn Hajar rahmallah is saying here and what Mullah al-Qari rahmallah just said. So we'll come back to that shortly. So the term mursal, yeah, it's you remember when we were talking about mursal and we explained how it has such a vast meaning. So some scholars have taken it to even be another word for munqati'. So here it is taking into consideration that vast meaning. It is not restricting it to the missing link after the tabi'i. Again, Mullah Ali Qari rahmallah, to quote from him, he said, ثم أعلم أنه ليس المراد بالإرسال هنا ما سقط من سنده الصحابي. That under the chapter of Irsal which is done, Ibn Hajar rahimahullah mentioned, وهو ما سقط من آخره من بعد تابعي هو المرسل. That the missing link, if it is after the tabi'i, then it is mursal. So here when he's mentioning mursal al-Khafī, then this here is not in that constricted meaning, that only focusing on the missing link after the tabi'i. Like that Shaykh Rahili in his footnotes, he says, في أي موضع من السند, irrespective where the missing link is in the sanad. So irrespective which person in the sanad narrates from a contemporary, something which he did not meet, to such an extent that, like an example we have given, even in today's times, you can use it if you have not met from someone, you have not met someone directly, and you are quoting from them. فالمرسل الخفي لا يشترط له موضع من السند بخلاف المرسل الظاهر الذي هو قول التابع قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فإن هذا هو موضعه. And likewise in Yawaqit wa Durar, Al-Imam Munawi rahmallah, he quotes Najmuddin bin Ahmad al-Ghayti. He says that وقال شيخنا النجم الغيطي المراد بالإرسال هنا مطلق الانقطاع, irrespective of where the missing link is, لا ما سقط منه الصحابي كما هو المشهور في حد المرسل. And now he says والجمهور على أن المرسل الخفي قسم من المدلس لا قسيما له. So this is what Najm al-Ghayti said. So that's the point which you want to make here, that Ibn Hajar rahmallah is the first person ever to make this distinction. Scholars before him, they would regard all of this here as tadlis. So whether a person is quoting his ustad, or is quoting a sheikh, or a person who he met, is quoting from him something which he did not hear directly, or whether he's quoting from a contemporary who he did not meet, if he's quoting from him, in all circumstances, scholars would use the word tadlis. So whether it, if you have to read the verdicts of earlier scholars, you will find that they also refer to narrations of a contemporary who clearly did not meet it, refer to it as tadlis. So that's their practice. And then if you have to look at definitions before Ibn Hajar rahmallah, you will find then also they are not making this kind of a distinction. So let's go back to Allama Khatib rahimahullah. In Al-Kifaya, he said, and because you see there right at the end, Ibn Hajar said, وَكَلَامُ الْخَطِيبِ فِي الْكِفَايَةِ يَقْتَضِي وَهُوَ الْمُعْتَمَدِ. So here let's show you what actually Allama Khatib rahimahullah mentioned in Al-Kifaya. He said, وَالْمُدَلَّسِ رِوَايَةُ الْمُحَدِّثِ عَمَّنْ عَاصَرَهُ وَلَمْ يَلْقَهُ. He's clearly saying that you met, you are in the same time, the same era as a person, وَلَمْ يَلْقَهُ. And he's giving this here as the definition. فَيُتَوَهَّمْ أَنَّهُ سَمِعَ مِنْهُ أَوْ رِوَايَتُهُ. And then he's giving the next type, أو روايته عمن قد لقيه ما لم يسمع منه. هذا هو التدليس في الإسناد. So he's clearly giving a definition. And you can see that in his definition, he's only defining mudallas, but he's giving, in this definition of mudallas, he's giving what Ibn Hajar rahmallah regarded as al-Mursal al-Khafī. So he didn't create any distinction. He's not making any differences between Mursal al-Khafī and Tadlis. Rather, everything he's considering it under the category of Tadlis. Likewise, another scholar before Ibn Hajar rahmallah, Mullah Ali Qari rahmallah, quotes Shamsuddin al-Jazari. He said that أما تدليس الإسناد فهو أن يروي عمن لقيه. So that's the one type. أو عاصره, or maybe you just were in the same time as that person. ما لم يسمع منه. Likewise, Ibn Salah rahimahullah, he also did not create this distinction. In fact, he brought a chapter on Mursal al-Khafī, but he gives a whole different explanation there. It says النوع الثامن والثلاثون معرفة المراسيل الخفي إرسالها. So this here is on page 288, still very far from where we are now. Make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to reach until there. You know, Mullah Fazlur Rahmani always says what someone's dua and what someone's karama. So maybe one of you with your karama, with your miracle, inshallah we will reach until there. And this is actually true, that sometimes it happens over and over because of the sincerity and of a student or even a questioner. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts things in a person's mind. Many times it happens that someone asks you a question, that maybe you went to sleep and then you're trying to fall off to sleep. You cannot fall off to sleep. You can't fall off to sleep. And then you wake up and then you look at that person's question and you see it as urgent. So then you understand that he asked that question with so much sincerity that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kept you awake so that you can answer him. You answer him and immediately you go back. So that is the ikhlas of those who are studying and the ikhlas of those who question. So nevertheless, he brought that chapter and he explains it in a completely different way. When explaining tadlis, then he clearly mentions, he says that أحدهما تدليس الإسناد وهو أن يروي عمن لقيه ما لم يسمع منه. So that is what Ibn Hajar rahimahullah mentioned. But then he said, أو عمن عاصره ولم يلقه موهما أنه قد لقيه وسمعه منه. So what Ibn Hajar rahimahullah mentioned, an-Mursal al-Khafī, he put it under the definition of the al-Isnad. He also did not make any distinction. So this is how majority of the, actually not even majority, we can safely say all the scholars before Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, they used this term. Even his main teachers in Usul, so Alama Bulqini and Alama Iraqi rahimahullah, they did not make this distinction. Ibn Hajar rahimahullah is the first one who created this difference between Mudallas and between Mursal al-Khafī. Now, what's the reason Ibn Hajar rahimahullah will do this? He does it so that the ruling of that person who narrates from a contemporary, even though everybody knows that he didn't meet him, that ruling can be lighter. So he says, وَلِهَذَا, in his nukat he says, وَلِهَذَا لَمْ يَضُمَّ الْعُلَمَاء مَنْ أَرْسَلَهُ وَذَمُّوا مَنْ دَلَّسَهُ وَاللَّهُ أَعْلَمُ. So the ruling, although before that he mentions that obviously all is are rejected, but this year it has a lighter ruling. Now the point is that if Ibn Hajar rahimahullah wanted to make this difference, then it is fine. But the problem comes now in the next paragraph, that he regards all those who did not make the difference to be incorrect. And he then presents two proofs, but both of these proofs are out of place. So let's go through his text first. He says, وَالْفَرْقُ بَيْنَ الْمُدَلَّسِ وَالْمُرْسَلِ الْخَفِي دَقِيقٌ. There is a very subtle difference between mudallas and mursal al-Khafī. He says that حَصَلَ تَحْرِيرُهُ بِمَا ذُكِرَ هُنَا. You will easily understand it from this here. وَهُوَ أَنَّ التَّدْلِيسِ يَخْتَصُّ بِمَنْ رَوَى عَمَّنْ عُرِفَ لِقَاؤُهُ إِيَّاهُ. That tadlis is where a person is narrating something which he did not hear from such a person who everybody knows that he met that person. So if everybody, for example, if they know that you studied under a particular person, and now you are quoting that person, and you are narrating from him something which he did not say. Maybe say he mentioned something after you already qualified, etc. Once you are no more doing that subject by the teacher, then that is tadlis. فَأَمَّا إِنْ عَاصَرَهُ. But if you are in the same time, but now look at his words here and pay attention to this. He's saying, وَلَمْ يُعْرَفْ أَنَّهُ لَقِيَهُ. So remember that he's saying, وَلَمْ يُعْرَفْ أَنَّهُ لَقِيَهُ. It's not known that he met him. Then فَهُوَ الْمُرْسَلُ الْخَفِي. Then that is called mursal al-Khafī. So until there, it's fine that he's creating this distinction. But then he says, وَمَنْ أَدْخَلَ فِي تَعْرِيفِ التَّدْلِيسِ الْمُعَاصَرَةِ وَلَوْ بِغَيْرِ لُقِيٍّ لَزِمَهُ دُخُولُ الْمُرْسَلِ الْخَفِي فِي تَعْرِيفِهِ. He's saying that those people who regard tadlis and mursal al-Khafī to be the same thing, then it's going to become compulsory upon them to even add the narrations of a contemporary who everybody knows that he's quoting from someone who he did not meet. He has to add it under the definition of the list. So we say, yeah, that's fine. That's our scholars done all along. So there's no problem with that. But then he says, وَالصَّوَابُ أَتَّفْرَقَ بَيْنَهُمَا. He's saying it's correct that you create a distinction. So it's correct according to him. But scholars before him, they didn't feel that there's any incorrect. It's incorrect for them. You know, the opposite of as-sawab is that it's incorrect. They didn't feel that it's incorrect to say that if a person, everybody knows he didn't meet a particular sheikh, to call that person's narrations from the sheikh as mudallas. No one felt it to be a problem. Now, yeah, even if ala sabili tanazzul, that if we have to just assume that what Ibn Hajar is saying is correct, then too, there is no problem in saying that there is umum wa khusus between the two of these two terms, that they are partially the same and they differ in some aspects. So this is what Ibn Hajar rahmallah is saying. So basically, is regarding those who do not create the distinction as wrong, because that's why I say وَالصَّوَابُ التَّفْرِقَ بَيْنَهُمَا. But and now he brings proofs to back up his statement and this difference which he's making. So he says, وَيَدُلُّ عَلَى أَنَّ اعْتِبَارَ اللُّقِيِّ فِي التَّدْلِيسِ دُونَ الْمُعَاصَرَةِ وَحْدَهَا لَا بُدَّ مِنْهُ اتفاق أهل العلم بالحديث على أن رواية المخضرمين كأبي عثمان النهدي وقيس بن أبي حازم عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم من قبيل الإرسال لا من قبيل التدليس. He's saying that the proof to show you that this if a person has to narrate from a contemporary something which he did not hear, and it's everybody knows that he didn't meet, or the point which I told you there, لم يعرف أنه لقيه. It doesn't have to be established that he did not meet, rather it is not known whether he did meet or he did not meet. Then he's saying the proof is that if you have to look, the scholars have consensus that if a mukhadaram, now who is a mukhadaram? There's a dedicated chapter on mukhadaramin on page 113, and inshallah we'll discuss the term in more detail there, and we'll scrutinize the definition which Ibn Hajar gives there. But for our purpose now, just to understand, a mukhadaram is a Muslim who loved. So a Muslim, a person who believed in the Prophet ﷺ, who loved in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, but he did not meet him. Or for now, you can just look at the footnotes, take that definition there. المخضرمون الذين أدركوا الجاهلية في حياة رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وأسلموا. They even accepted Islam in the time of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. ولا صحبة لهم. But they didn't meet the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or they didn't come in the Mubarak company of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So like I said, that we'll discuss everything in more detail there, and we'll also discuss all the related aspects. For example, Mullah al-Qari rahmallah says that وعدهم مسلم 20 نفسا الأشعث bin Kays مخضرم. Like I said, that we are going to discuss that. Our objective here is not to discuss mukhadaramin. We're going to discuss mukhadaramin there. Imam Muslim said that there are 20. We will also discuss whether they are 20 or whether they are not more. For now, our objective is to show you Ibn Hajar's proof. Ibn Hajar is saying that his proof that we cannot, if it is not known whether a person met the person who he is quoting from, if it is not known, then it has to go under the category of Risal. It cannot be under the category of Tadlis. He's saying that, look, when a mukhadram narrates a hadith from the Prophet ﷺ, then everybody will accept it as Irsal, and then the rulings of Irsal will apply. So even in the Shafi'i madhab, you remember we done all those conditions. It will not be regarded as Tadlis, and the ruling of Tadlis will not apply to it. So this is his proof. He says, وَلَوْ كَانَ مُجَرَّدَ الْمُعَاصَرَ يُكْتَفَى بِهِ فِي التَّدْلِيسِ لَكَانَ هَؤُلَاءِ مُدَلِّسِينَ. Then you will have to call every mukhadram who narrates directly from the Prophet ﷺ, you will have to call them you will have to call them مُدَلِّسِينَ. Why? لأنهم عاصروا النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. They were clearly living in the time of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم قطعا, ولكن لم يعرف هل لقوه أم لا. But it's not known whether they met him or not. So you understand the qiyas which Ibn Hajar rahmallah is making? He is saying that when a mukhadram, everybody knows that they lived in the same time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yet if he narrates something from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam without mentioning his source, then all scholars, he's mentioning itbaq ahl al-ilm, ittifaq, ijma', everyone will say that that narration is mursal. No one would ever say that it is tadlis, and no one would regard him as a mudallis. So here, this is the qiyas which Ibn Hajar rahimahullah is making. But there are so many different ways to respond to this here, and the best way to respond to it is that we say, look at what Ibn Hajar rahimahullah himself said with regards to mukhadaramin. He himself, if you turn to page 113, you will see that he said, وَالصَّحِيحُ أَنَّهُمْ مَعْدُودُونَ فِي كِبَارِ التَّابِعِينَ. That وَصَحِيحُ أَنَّهُمْ مُعَدَّدُونَ. That the more correct view is that they are regarded as senior tabi'un. So if they are regarded as senior tabi'un, then we done the definition of irsal. So there's no problem just a few pages back, Ibn Hajar rahmallah told us the definition of mursal. So this here is total irsalun jaliyun wadih. It is not even tadlis to begin with. So therefore, there is no chances of it to be a tadlis. So that's the best way to answer. That shows that this Ibn Hajar rahmallah cannot use this here as evidence to create a distinction. Furthermore, Ibn Hajar rahmallah is putting this here under a section of Khafī. You can see that he says, وَالْقِسْمُ الثَّانِي وَهُوَ الْخَفِي. And then he mentioned Mudallas, and I've mentioned Mursal al-Khafī. He's calling it Mursal al-Khafī, he's calling it hidden. But with regards to a mukhadharam, okay, although he's saying, لَمْ يُعْرَفْ هَلْ لَقُوهُ أَمْ لَهُ. But for those mukhadharamun, when scholars who came thereafter, they and the same thing will apply to the different narrators. You don't know if a particular narrator lived in a particular era. For example, if I had to quote, maybe say, any scholar of today, say Tariq bin Iwadullah. Now you don't know whether I met him or not. So that's exact same thing. So what the mukhadram mean? He's saying that they are from the tabi'in. If you want to use this proof of lakin lam yu'raf hal laquhum la, then it means that they come under Sahaba and you will have to accept their narration. But because of this thing, lam yu'raf hal laquhu am la, therefore we are regarding him as a tabi'i. So if we are regarding him as a tabi'i, then his narrations, we would have to put it under the category of tabi'un, who narrate directly from the Prophet ﷺ. So it becomes totally irsalun jali. There's no need to make it irsalun khafī. So this is what Mullah Ali Qari rahmallah says, وَالظَّاهِرْ أَنَّ الْمُخَاذَرَةَ مَنْ عُرِفَ عَدَمُ لُقِيِّهِ. That a mukhadram are those who it is known that they didn't meet the Prophet ﷺ. لَا مَنْ لَمْ يُعْرَفْ أَنَّهُ لَقِيَهُ. And he says, وَبَيْنَهُمَا فَرْقٌ كَمَا لَا يَخْفَى. So he says, فَيَكُونُ حَدِيثٌ مِنَ الْمُرْسَلِ الْجَلِي قَرِيبٌ مِنْ مَرَاسِلِ الصَّحَابَةِ. Therefore, their irsal will be regarded as irsalul jali. And the list is all about the missing link being hidden. So therefore, if a person has to clearly say that he did not hear from a particular person, say for example, I clearly tell you right now that, I didn't ever in my whole life meet Sheikh Tariq bin Iwadullah. I say, I'm clearly telling it to you. Now immediately after that, I tell you that Tariq bin Iwadullah said, none of you would think that I'm trying to deceive you. Because I clearly just told it to you, it's now apparent. So even when it was in the time of the narrators, if a person clearly mentioned that a particular person is not his sheikh, he said that I regret I couldn't meet this person, or I went to Medina, I should have rather went to Baghdad at that time, and I would have met him. So it's clearly, everybody knows now that although they were living in the same time that person passed away, but everybody knows that he didn't meet that person. Now if you have, so for example, Imam Bukhari rahmallah and Abdul Razak. So it's clearly that they lived in the same time, but they did not meet. So now if Imam Bukhari has to quote and says, Qala Abdul Razak, everybody will know that he doesn't have any ulterior motives and he's not doing it to deceive anybody. Everybody knows. So it is apparent that doesn't even go under that list. And no one would even consider it as that list. So Imam Munawi rahmallah, he quotes his teachers and he says that قال بعض مشايخنا, our mashayikh told us, that our teachers told us, يقال إنما وصف the scholars of the past إنما وصفوا رواية من ذكره بالإرسال لأنهم من التابعين. That is why they call the narrations mursal. وتحديث التابعي عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لا شك في وصفه بالإرسال. There is no doubt that most definitely you will call those narrations as إرسال. ومما يؤيد أن تحديث الصحابي عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم بحديث لم يسمعه عنه مع تحقق اللقاء لا يوصف بالتدليس أدبا مع أنه منه. He's saying that if you are taking this whole thing, if Ibn Hajar rahmallah is using this here as a proof, then it's going to lead to a problem that a sahabi, if he has to narrate something from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then that clearly falls under the definition which Ibn Hajar rahmallah gave for tadlis. It is definitely سمي بذلك لكون الراوي لم يسم من حدثه وأوهم سماعه للحديث ممن لم يحدث به. So it's clearly Sahaba radiallahu anhum met the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's how they did Sahaba in the first place. So they met the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, yet they are now narrating something from the Prophet ﷺ which they do not hear. So that's ayn al-tadlis. It falls under the exact definition which Ibn Hajar rahmallah gave. So Ibn Hajar rahmallah, if he's using this qiyas, then his qiyas there would not be correct. For tadlis it won't be correct, because then he would have to say, since we are calling the narrations of a sahabi from the Prophet ﷺ, those narrations which he did not hear, since we are calling those narrations tadlis, therefore it is incorrect to call a narration of a person of a person who narrates from a contemporary what he did not hear. It is incorrect to call it tadlis. You can see how it's going to be incorrect. So in this year, it's going to lead to so many different problems. Alternatively, you can say that if a sahabi narrates from the Prophet ﷺ, then it is tadlis. So if you're calling that tadlis, then you will have to say that anyone who calls that mursal is incorrect. So in this way, you're going to have so many different problems if you use this qiyas of Ibn Hajar rahimahullah. So basically, you cannot take the definition of one link and then find problems with the definition of other links. Because then you can even extend it further. You can say that his whole definition of mu'allaq is wrong, because mu'allaq is where a person leaves out the name of the person who narrates from him. So you can say that, who said that when a sahabi, if he narrates from the Prophet ﷺ what he did not hear, who said it's mursal? It actually goes under ta'liq. So like that. Or if it is confirmed that the tabi'i only left out a sahabi, then calling it mursal. In this way here, it's going to lead to demolishing all the different istilahat. So in short, the qiyas which he is making here about one link, it has its own unique laws, and therefore he cannot apply it. But then Ibn Hajar rahmallah presents his second proof to show that no, a distinction which has to be made, and this proof is actually more stronger. He says, وَمِمَّنْ قَالَ بِاشْتِرَاطِ اللِّقَاءِ فِي التَّدْلِيسِ الإمام الشافعي وأبو بكر البزار وكلام الخطيب في الكفاية يقتضي وهو المعتمد. So now this here is concrete evidence. If it's quoting Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, then obviously ala ra'si wal ayn, most definitely we will have to accept it. If Imam Shafi'i made this distinction, but as we mentioned that this istilahat came about afterwards, and here if we have a scholar like Imam Shafi'i giving us the definition, then definitely we would have to accept it. But we need to go back to the original sources and see whether Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah really did say it or not. So when we go back to Ar-Risala of Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, we find that he is speaking about the conditions to accept a narration or to accept a narrator. So then he mentions there, بَرِيًّا مِنْ أَن يَكُونَ مُدَلِّسًا يُحَدِّثُ عَمَّنْ لَقِيَهُ مَا لَمْ يَسْمَعْ مِنْهُ. In fact, the portion before that, if Allah Ta'ala inspires us, probably we will quote it in the next lesson of Muqaddamah ibn Salah. منها يكون من حدث به ثقة في دينه معروفا بصدق في حديثه عاقلا لما يحدث به. So that whole Imam Shafi'i rahmallah, Ibn Salah rahmallah actually gets it from Imam Shafi'i rahmallah. So here he's explaining now that how you must, what kind of a narrator you can accept his narrations. So the narrator should be such, bariyan, he should be free from being a mudallis. And now who is a mudallis? يحدث عمن لقي ما لم يسمع منه. So he's using the word amman laqiya. He narrates from those people who he met what he did not hear from them. So Ibn Hajar rahmallah assumed this here to be a definition, but as you can see that is not a definition. Imam Shafi'i rahmallah is not defining that he's mentioning it here in a context. His objective is to show you on whether the narrator, his narrations could be accepted or not. So there's a huge difference between someone actually defining something and between something as being mentioned in passing. Like Mukhadram, it was mentioned in passing, and that is why I didn't respond to that, because we come into the chapter of Mukhadrameen. So likewise, he's mentioning this here in passing. His objective is not to give you a jami' and a mani' a definition of tadlis, a proper official definition. So, in this case, he's just mentioning one type of tadlis. He's saying that he should not be a tadlis in such a way that he narrates from people who he met, he narrates from them what he did not hear. So that is with regards to Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah. And that the meaning which we are taking is further supported by the usage of the term by scholars after him, from Yahya bin Ma'in and all earlier scholars, and Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, etc. When you open the books of Ilal and books of Jarh wa Ta'dil and you read their verdict, then you will find that they did not create any distinction whether if a person narrated from a contemporary what he did not hear from that contemporary, even if he didn't meet that contemporary, they would refer to it as tadlis. So all that strengthens our understanding of the text of Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah. Then with regards to Allama Bazzar rahimahullah, he mentions it in a book which is mafqud, and therefore we have to go to other sources to see exactly what he said. So we go, Allama Iraqi rahimahullah mentions it in a Taqir wal-Idah. So there, after commenting on a definition of Ibn Salah, then he quotes it. He says that Allama al-Bazzar gave the definition, وَهُوَ أَن يَرْوِيَ عَمَّنْ قَدْ سَمِعَ مِنْهُ. So he's using the word قَدْ سَمِعَ مِنْهُ مَا لَمْ يَسْمَعُهُ مِنْهُ غَيْرَ أَن يَذْكُرَ أَنَّهُ سَمِعَهُ مِنْهُ. So firstly, again, we don't know the context, we don't know the reason for the statement. Probably it's like the same with regards to Imam Shafi'i rahmallah. He didn't intend to define the term, rather he's just mentioning it in passing. So if we had his book, we could have been able to evaluate it more accurately. But then also, the second thing is that he's not negating that if a person did not hear, he's just mentioning one portion of the definition. So clearly he's not giving, we cannot make ihtijaj bi mafhum al-mukhalaf, because if you have to do that, you know that Shafi'is, they generally use mafhum al-mukhalafa as a dalil. But here, if you're going to say that he's, if you take it as mafhum al-mukhalafa, that because he only mentioned the siyah, so whatever he did not mention is excluded, then we will tell Ibn Hajar rahmallah that he didn't mention anything of tadlis al-shuyukh or tadlis al-taswiyah, tadlis al-'atf, or all other types of tadlis. So are all of those excluded? So then Ibn Hajar will say, no, it's not excluded. And Allama Bazzar is only mentioning one specific type. So that's what we say, that yes, he's only mentioning one specific type and of tadlis. So therefore his statement cannot be used. Then Ibn Hajar rahmallah used the words of Khatib. But now in the beginning of the lesson, we just quoted from Khatib. Allama Khatib rahmallah, right in the beginning of his kitab, he said, وَالْمُدَلِّسْ رِوَايَةُ الْمُحَدِّثْ عَمَّنْ عَسَرَهُ وَلَمْ يَلْقَهُ فَيَتَوَهَّمَ أَنَّهُ سَمِعَهُ مِنْهُ. He even mentioned it first, that this here is the definition of a mudallas that you met. So what Ibn Hajar is mentioning, an-Mursal al-Khafī, the exact same thing Allama Khatib is mentioning it, mudallas. And he mentioned this here under, he brought a chapter for definitions. مَعْرِفَةُ مَا يَسْتَعْمِلُ أَصْحَابُ الْحَدِيثِ مِنَ الْعِبَارَاتِ. So Ibn Hajar rahmallah clearly must this ibara and this definition of Ibn Hajar rahmallah. And you know that when you are coming up with something new and you are making rad on others, then you need to do a thorough research. So yeah, in spite of Ibn Hajar rahmallah coming up with a new definition and also making rad on others, he obviously would have gone and researched through the books of Allama Khatib rahmallah. But now, so that makes us understand that he clearly must this definition, because if he found this here, then he would have never been able to say or to mention kalam al-Khatib bil-kifaya yaqtadi wa al-mu'tamad. So he probably, how Ibn Hajar rahmallah must it is because maybe when he was researching, he must have went to the end, at the end of al-kifaya, Allama Khatib rahmallah brought a section, the Bab al-Kalam fi at-tadlis wa ahkami. So he brought so Ibn Hajar rahmallah must have went there, and it actually in his nukat he even quote the text from there. التدليس متضمن الإرسال لا محالة لإمساك المدلس عن ذكر الواسطة. He mentions this here in his nukat. So he went there. He didn't think that the Ramadan will be right in the beginning of the book. So since he missed this definition, obviously we can see that it was incorrect for him to quote Allama Khatib rahmallah. So from all of this here, we can conclude that Ibn Hajar rahmallah is the only one to create a distinction between tadlis and mursal al-Khafī. When you are going to find scholars of the past using the word tadlis for a person who met from a mu'asir, even though everybody knows that he didn't meet that mu'asir, then those past scholars are not wrong, and there is no evidence to back up what Ibn Hajar rahmallah said, and whatever he has quoted is not correct. Inshallah, we will continue from here on Thursday. Until then, jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum.